Well, hi everybody. Father Alex here, Vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. My guest this week on the Godcast is John Sweeney, who is a renowned author and journalist who is spending much of his time out in Ukraine at the moment. So I'm very much looking forward to chatting to him, and I hope you enjoy the interview. If you do check out hundreds of other Godcast guests. There is literally something there for everybody, whether you are into politics, music, journalism, God, whatever it is, there is somebody there I'm sure you'll find from a wide range of guests. You'll also find me in a couple of publications in this book here called Are You Really Okay by Stacey Dooley, which I've contributed a chapter to, and I'm also the author of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar Pre-Story, which is out now, available in Waterstones and in all good bookshops. So here we are. Do now enjoy this interview with John Sweeney. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast today is John Sweeney, a renowned author and journalist. John, welcome to the Godcast. How are you doing?
Very good. I'm wearing my lucky orange hat because I'm in Ukraine, and I'm actually in Irpin when the Russian army were here in the beginning of the big war in February 22. They were 12 miles from the city centre, and if I'd been talking to the Godcast at that moment, then I'd be in trouble because the Russians would have taken me away. Even though I'd said, listen, I used to be an altar boy and I've said my prayers. But it's bloody hot outside. So forgive me, I'm going to take off my fancy, my lucky orange hat.
The people who don't know about that hat, John, tell us, because there'll be a few people who'll go, what's that all about?
So what happened, Alex, was that I went, actually, Valentine's Day. I don't know about you, but I've had some bad Valentine's days in my life. And when Valentine's Day 22, I flew to Kyiv, and you could then, because I felt that the Russian army was going to invade Ukraine, and it was important to try and tell the truth. And I first called Putin a war criminal 24 years ago when I went to Chechnya undercover, and I saw what the Russian army under his orders was doing there. So I felt sick of the West backing away from Putin. We let him get away with murder again and again and again. And I thought, enough, I'm sick of this. So I'm going to go to Kyiv and I'm going to hang around. And all I need, I'm a simple fellow. All I need is a hole in the ground and a bottle of Irish whiskey. And I had my coat, and in my coat was this ski hat I bought in an Italian ski resort. And when I went in, it was cold and I'm bald. And I said, have you got a hat? And they said, yeah, this one, it's the only one left. And I said, got anything, better, a black one or something, a nice one? I didn't know, but for you, €3. So I put it in my duffel coat and I forget about it. When the war starts, I put it on because it's cold, to keep my head warm. And it has another virtue, is that the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian police, are paranoid about Russian spies. Remember, the Russians get to 12 miles from the center of Kyiv. They get here, where I am right now. In London terms, imagine the Russians were at Enfield if you're standing in Trafalgar Square, that close. And so their paranoia made them think that everybody was a Russian spy. And there are moments when you're moving late at night after the curfew, when you're moving too fast, when you're all the chaos of war, people got shot by mistake. That happened. So this meant to a Russian, to a Ukrainian, I am not a Russian spy, because no bloody Russian would wander around the streets of Kyiv wearing this late at night, a bit drunk.
Yeah.
And what was frustrating was it didn't work, because on day 2, I got arrested for being a Russian spy. And I said to the guy who arrested me, do I look like a Russian spy? And actually, I had this on, and I had a camel-collared duffel coat, so like Major Calloway in The Third Man, although it's black and white, but it's that kind of color, and I couldn't look more bloody English I look a bit like a Dutch football hooligan but an Englishman with a kind of Dutch football hooligan hat. Anyway, never mind. Funnily enough, I made friends with the guy who arrested me, and I stayed alive. So I am, so I wear it, and I do video diaries for my Twitter followers. At John Sweeney Raw is my thing, and they expect me to wear my hat, but it's August. It's 30 degrees or more out there right now. So I feel foolish. That's what's expected. There we are.
Yeah.
I'm having a. Do I call you father, by the way?
Call me Alex. Just call me Alex, John. But you're
yeah. And are you're kind of you're C of E, I'm guessing, yeah.
C of E, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And a few of my C of E friends were like chuffed when they found out you were coming on, and they wanted me to ask you this question, John. Is like, what drives you to be there? I love listening to you, John, and I don't wish to smoke up the proverbial, but when I'm listening to you talking about Ukraine, I know I'm getting the authentic version, what's happening, what's going on. But from your perspective, you see, and you must have seen some pretty atrocious stuff. Do you worry about your own mortality? What is it that keeps you there, John, to keep reporting?
Well, I kind of, my own mortality. In December, I fell over on black ice while delivering crutches, and I tore my quadriceps tendon in my left knee, so I couldn't move. I mean, God, where is he when you want him? Eh? Anyway, never mind. The other way around is I've been very lucky all my life physically, and anyway, I had a fall. So I had 2 operations on my knee. The first one in Ukraine didn't work. The second one did beautifully. I had that in London. So I waited till I'm better. So I haven't been here for 7 months. But I'm here because I do feel a real passionate commitment to Ukraine. I'm writing a novel about the Battle of Kyiv right now. And I've got lots of friends here who are they're delighted to see me. I have the catchphrase when I do my video diaries, which is VPDFO, and I'm not going to spell it out, but it stands for Vladimir Putin do F asterisk off. And I've got my first kind of night back, we were in a bar, and there's a gang of about 20 of us, some of my pals, some other people, and everybody said, and we have a simple message from Vladimir Putin, do F off. So I kind of I love the joy here. And now what's, as Ukrainians have just invaded Russia. And I was actually having a Negroni cocktail with a friend of mine who's in the Ukrainian army. And he said, "Oh, I've been to Russia on holiday." I said, "What? Stop." And yeah, I've been on holiday without a passport. And it takes me a bit to work out what he's at. So he's gone to Kursk without a passport. And I said, "What was it like?" And he said, "Well, it was cool." And then he laughed like a wolf. So it's true to say, Alex, that for a year this place has been down because the Russians have been on the front foot. And they have a particular way of fighting their war, which is to use a meat grinder. They have more metal, more artillery, and they have more flesh and bones than the Ukrainians. They've got more bodies, and Putin doesn't give a damn about his people. So when the meat grinder war, when it's a meat Ukraine a kind of war the Russians will win. It's very slow, but it's relentless and terrifying and horrible. And the Ukrainians have been effectively losing the war for a year. Suddenly, from August the 6th, the Ukrainian invasion into Kursk, the boot's on the other foot. And if there's some kind, I don't think there will ever be a full ceasefire while Putin's in charge because of all the war crimes he's committed, but there could be a kind of mutual agreement to stop fighting, which is kind of like a North Korea, South Korea kind of stopping. That is possible in the future. Ukraine's bargaining position has just got a ton better because they've got a chunk of Russia. Now, the issue is, can they hold it? Who knows? But the deeper answer, anyway, that's just kind of what's happening at the moment. But there is also, listen, this is a Godcast, so we should be talking about deeper questions too. One of those must be, why is Ukraine fighting this war? To stay alive, to survive as a country. But I also think it's sending us a message that democracy must be defended. Free speech does not come free. And I do feel that if Ukraine is defeated, then we're next. Then Putin will come for NATO, and if he attacks a NATO member, then we're obliged to defend. So that I genuinely don't want to see a war between, our people and the Russians, our armed forces and the Russian armed forces. I'm afraid of that. But the way of preventing a war is to prepare for one and to help the Ukrainians. So if we help the Ukrainians hard, then hopefully we'll never have to, it won't get as dark as sometimes I can imagine it becoming.
A couple of questions, John. Please forgive my ignorance. I think I try and educate myself on matters around the world, but what's stopping Putin just going and bombing those troops that have invaded?
Well, he'd be bombing Russia. So, and there's quite a lot of people, elderly in particular, who haven't moved. So if he bombs those troops in Kursk, he bombs his own people, and there will be enough media who will show that, and that looks bad. Secondly, the Ukrainians have got very, very good at a number of things, but one of which is drone warfare and using and being able to dram Russian drones. That makes it more difficult for drones to operate, so they get good quality understanding of what the targets are. So the Russians got a problem with targeting. Number one, they're going to hit their own people. Number two, they can't get drones in at the moment because the Ukrainians are jamming them. The third is the Ukrainians have got missiles and they've been hitting the Russian air bases, which have been bombing Ukraine. And so the Russians are hanging further and further back. And so right now, if a Russian jet goes up into the sky, Ukrainians will fire a missile at it, and there is a good chance it gets knocked out of the sky. What the Russians can do is fire rockets, and they fire a lot of rockets at Ukraine proper. But it's bad for Russia to start firing rockets at Russia. So there is there's also two other things. Ukrainians haven't gone there. They haven't taken, this is Kursk Oblast or region or county. Russia's so big, county sounds silly, but maybe it's the best way of explaining it to people. And they haven't taken the if you like, the cathedral town or whatever, which is Kursk itself. But in Kursk, there is a nuclear power station. And in that station, there is it's a massive nuclear power station. And the Ukrainians are within artillery fire or rocket fire of that power station. Now, they're not going to hit it. But remember, the Russians have got control of the Ukrainian nuclear power station down south, Zaporizhzhia, Europe's biggest. So there's a kind of Mexican standoff.
Yeah.
If the Russians behave badly, Ukrainians can retaliate. Something else, Ukrainians have got hold of the gas meat. There's a pipeline which runs from Russia through Ukraine, and Ukraine gets money from the Russians for allowing it to cross. They take some of the gas for their own energy supplies, and it ends up in Hungary. And it helps keep Hungary, it'll help keep Hungary warm this winter. Now the Ukrainians have got it. So the dilemma for the Russians is they try and if they make the captured area, if they flatten it, they blow up their own pipeline. And that's a problem too. Far bigger is the political embarrassment of Russia being invaded. And also, if you look at the pictures, when Russia invaded Ukraine, there were tons of farmers driving tractors, there were people throwing stuff. There was a lot of brave Ukrainians standing up to the Russians. When Ukraine invades Russia, there's virtually nothing. I haven't seen a single moment where a Russian citizen says, go on, go back. Now, you're Burnley, yeah?
Burnley,
That's where
Lancashire, yeah.
Yeah. So, listen, Vladimir Putin, there are parts of Burnley I advise you not to invade. Like it's the line from Casablanca. Rick says to the Nazi major, there's parts of Kyiv I advise you not to invade. Parts of New York I'd advise you not to invade. But I can't imagine Russia invading a single bit of our country, Britain, and there not being a fight immediately. Not only our armed forces, but also ordinary people, fighting for our country. Despite all our troubles, that's just a given. What's interesting is when Ukraine attacked Russia, there's a lack of a fight back. And if I was Vladimir Putin, I would worry about that. I'm taking a sip of my wine.
You do right, John. It's so I think it's so worthwhile to get a longer version of what's going on. What's the mentality of the people in Ukraine, John, at the moment? What do they hate Russians with a passion? What's the general feeling for the everyday family? For where you are.
So Alex, it's tough. I do hate Russians actually, and they hate. And I've been to Russia, and I've written 2 books which your viewers and listeners might be interested in. The first is a book called Killer in the Kremlin, which is about Vladimir Putin, and everybody's bumped off. And the one I've written, which came out last month in July, was Murder in the Gulag: The Life and Death of Alexei Navalny. I met Navalny a couple of times, and he was a brave and good Russian. And my Ukrainian friends don't like him because he was a bit of a Russian imperialist. Most Russians are in a way they don't properly understand. But Navalny also stuck it to the Kremlin. By the way, my friend Seamus McCracken, who's a brilliant BBC cameraman, he said, filming you and Navalny meet Sweeney was like filming 2 big dogs sniff each other's bottoms. And Navalny was murdered by Putin in February, and he was good and brave. My Ukrainian friends don't like him because he said some foolish anti-Ukrainian things a while back, and that was, and they haven't forgiven him for that. But it's so. There's a friend of mine who's a waitress in a lovely cafe in Kyiv, and because I've hurt my knee and I hadn't been in Kyiv for 7 months, she was very pleased to see me when I rocked up the other day and said hello. And she's from Kherson, which is in the southwest, and the Russians, the Ukrainians have taken back Kherson, but the Russians are on the other side of the river, and the river is close. It's not the Dnipro. It's only I'm pretty sure about this, but it's the Russians are about 1,000 feet away, and they can fire drones, or sorry, they use drones against Ukrainian civilians in the city of Kherson. And her mum and dad still staying there, and she was describing her mum lives on something like the 9th floor of of a block of flats. And she's having a cup of coffee and she's looking at another block of flats and she sees a Russian zone come across. And there's an open window and the drone goes into the open window and goes bang. So that is an ordinary story from a waitress in a Kyiv cafe. So there are so many lives, there's so many people who have lost friends. I was in a small town in the center of Ukraine the other day, and there is a pedestrianized street with monuments to soldiers. And I was there last year, and the line of monuments has got longer, and essentially each monument is a square with 4 photographs on it that got big kind of man-sized posters of faces of mainly men, nearly all men in the Ukrainian army. And a year ago, there was a long line of them. The line has got longer, but they're not squares anymore, they're octagons. Get a sense of the loss. Now, in Kyiv and in Odessa, which is the party town near the beach, kind of like Brighton, you can forget sometimes the war is on, although every now and then there's a bomb or the air raid siren goes off. We call it Putin's lullaby. But for a lot of people, life is good, and you can forget about it. But in the sticks, it's grim. There's another thing: is that poor people. I'm afraid there is a shadow of corruption here, which is the Soviet shadow. I mean, Britain is corrupt too, but a lot of the old Soviet spaces are corrupt, and Ukraine is better, but still there's corruption. And so, if you pay a doctor, he can write you a note so you don't go to the war because you've got something wrong with you. This is what Donald Trump did. But the poor boys can't do that. So I think the sense that I get is that there are too many poor Ukrainians who are losing their lives and losing their limbs for fighting, and there isn't enough rich people doing their stuff. Now, this is probably a constant in all wars throughout history, but that's a saddening thing, which I'm seeing with my eyes. That's true.
It's sobering stuff to listen to, John. Can I ask about the church? A few days ago, I saw a video of Putin at a memorial signing himself, claiming to be a man of God. Just can you tie some of those loose ends up for me, John? Like, what is the relationship between him and the Russian church? Is it very much kind of it's his church, it's not God's church, for better expression? And also, if I could also just ask about the Ukrainian church. We're talking about 2 very devoutly religious nations here, aren't we? Just has the church got any influence in this?
Well, the first question, most people here are Orthodox, which means, and listen, you're the boss on this stuff, but sometime around whatever it is, 300 AD, the Christian church splits between the Catholics, who are based in Rome, and the Orthodox Christians, who are based in Constantinople. And when Constantinople falls, then Moscow and Kyiv are the 2 heads of the Orthodox Church, or the Russian Orthodox Church. And there is a problem in that, and this has been happening throughout the entire time of the Soviet Union, that Stalin blew up cathedrals and had a lot of priests murdered. But when the Nazis invaded, he realized that Orthodox Christianity was part of the glue of Russia. And so the priests were let out of jail and people were allowed to go to church again. And by the way, Russians and Ukrainians, people in the Soviet Union, appreciated this. Like, while there was a war on, you could pray to God, and boy, were those prayers necessary. So so that to Stalin, but also Stalin controlled the church through his secret police. Now there's a lovely burst of democracy under Gorbachev, then Yeltsin, for 10 years. When Putin rocks up, everything goes to hell in a handcart, including the church. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the patriarch, in English terms, the Archbishop of Canterbury, this guy called Patriarch Kirill. And Kirill is a former KGB or FSB informer, i.e. he's a police narc or spy when the country was a totalitarian police state. He's worth maybe $4 billion. And a lot of that money was through smuggling cigarettes. So imagine an Archbishop of Canterbury. I mean, I know they're a bit rough, and you've all, and sort of Rowan Williams, he's got, quite an intense person, whatever. I've met him. I like him very much. I admire him greatly. But none of them are worth 4 billion quid. None of them used to be a copper's narc in a police state. And none of them have got previous for smuggling fags, So when and Ukraine is very, very bothered that the priests who are loyal to the Russian patriarch may be double agents. This isn't nonsense. This is a real concern of the country fighting an existential fight against a brutal authoritarian regime. So you've got to look at it in that respect. But there is remember, there is a Ukrainian version of Orthodoxy where the head of it is based in Kyiv, and there are Catholics in the West. These are people, some of whom are there's a small minority of Polish Ukrainians, but basically these are Western Ukrainians who are Catholic from the time of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat, so wine is the best solution for that. And then there are some Muslims, not very many, a lot of them based in Crimea, which is still under Russian control. But you've got a society which is very Christian, fighting a Christian enemy. It's something worth noting. I once interviewed a guy called Geert Wilders, who's a Dutch far-right guy, and he's very he condemns diversity and is very rude about Islam, and very is always banging the drum about Islamist terror attacks. And I said, has the Netherlands been a victim of any terror attacks? They said, no, we've been lucky, we haven't got any. I said, no, you're wrong about that, because MH17 was shot down by a Russian big missile in 2014. And remember, it was going from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. 10 Britons died on that, but around 100 Dutch people. So it's a massive terror attack. And the Russians say it was the Ukrainians. It wasn't, it was the Russians. But it was Christian, whoever did it was Christian. And so it's something worth noting as a side point. But I've met Putin once, and I challenged him about the shooting down of MH17. And shortly afterwards, a man in a suit came and thumped me in the stomach. They didn't like my question.
I mean, John, I'm mindful of your time, but I want to ask you a few more questions if I can.
Yeah, sure. I've got a bit of wine, and I've got at some point I've got to reorder. But there we go.
I want to ask you about. Sorry, I'm quite a simplistic guy. If somebody just come and slotted Putin and just put him to sleep, would everything go away? What would be the next thing to happen if that was to happen?
Well, it would be. I would welcome that. I would welcome that. My view is that he would be replaced for a short time by one of his creatures, somebody else in his gang. But I would hope that there would be a sense in Russia that there is another Russia, and there is people are spellbound by his brainwashing. the reason I think Putin's very dangerous is that he is very he's cunning and subtle and supple, and he will attack. And then when he sees that things are against him, he'll reverse and go backwards and be charming. When I challenged him about MH17, at least at the very beginning, he was kind of charming, creepily so, almost as if he was effeminate, which he is. But I feel that he's incredibly dangerous. I think, I've no doubt in my mind whatsoever, that the dark Russian state helped push the vote for Brexit in Britain and helped elect Donald Trump in 2016. These are massive victories for the man in the Kremlin. Stalin never had that level of success. I mean, there were people like Kim Philby, yeah. But I mean, he was a top spy in MI6, but he wasn't the president of the United States. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is a creature of the Kremlin, but he's a terrible opportunist, and he was given his opportunity by the Kremlin, or an opportunity. And if you look at the pictures of him and Putin in 2018 in Helsinki, it looks like you're looking at a blackmailer, Putin, and the blackmail victim, Trump. So I think that if we get rid of Putin, then Russia will enter a time of chaos. So be it. I think the Russian Empire is too big, in the same way I think the British Empire was too big, and actually Britain became a much better society and a much better place when we said goodbye to our imperial gains and downsides. And that also will make Russia a better place for the future. But what Putin has done is he's created war and division again and again and again. He's responsible for the deaths of millions of people around the world, in Syria, in Chechnya, in Georgia, and now in Ukraine, and in Russia too. And I want him gone, and I want him dead.
What if Trump gets in November, John? What happens?
Well, he's not going to, like, the war won't stop in a day, because the Ukrainians will carry on fighting. They'll carry on fighting come what may. Yeah. As Churchill said, victory at all costs. They'll carry on fighting. I mean, like, there's a friend of mine who's Semyon Gluzman, who's a great psychiatrist, who said, I'm too old to fight, but if they come, I'll shout at them. I actually hope Trump, interesting Freudian slip there. I think that Trump won't get in because Kamala and lovely old Tim Walz have got they've got energy and joy, and America remains an optimistic country. And it's like, you're going to vote for Grumpy Granddad, or you're going to vote for the funny auntie. You're going to vote for the funny auntie. But Ukraine's not going to die. I also think that Ukraine's European supporters and the British and us, we will stand by Ukraine, and we need to help them more if the Americans run away. I don't think that that's going to happen. I hope, and actually I pray a bit, that won't happen. But we'll see. It's not down to us.
You said about optimism and America being an optimistic country. Just bringing matters back home, John. Do you think Britain is an optimistic country right now? I'm not sure when you landed in Ukraine, but the last few weeks have been pretty stressful. Even in my own town of Burnley, there's been some issues, and you know, I know you've had your time with Tommy Robinson, and he visited here, not at this election, but the one previously, and people are intrigued by him. And I recently interviewed Alex on Talk Radio about this, and she felt that we need to engage with the conversation rather than just try and brush it under the carpet. What's your assessment of things?
Well, of course, Tommy Robinson's been to Russia. Of course he has. Where's his money come from? Well, I don't know. But I think, but I was very depressed when the riots were taking place. I was very I'm a Liberal Democrat, but I was very pleased that Keir Starmer gripped the situation very quickly, and people who were rioting were arrested, tried, and convicted in good time. Justice must always happen in a timely fashion, and for once, the British judicial machinery got its finger out. Good on them, and then the riots stopped. I was Britain is a great country. By the way, I can say that because I've been to Moscow and Beijing and Pyongyang, and I invite Tommy Robinson to go to Pyongyang and do what he likes to do in Britain and sees what happens. Of course he won't. But our society is beautiful and it's open, and we have a lot of trouble with it. Of course we do. But an open society which allows free debate and free discussion, that is far more wonderful and beautiful and better than a dictatorship. Full stop. One of the problems we've got is the people from the far right, like Tommy Robinson. I mean, he said he'd like to have a pint with Vladimir Putin. Oh, really? He's a poisoner. He's a poisoner. Tommy Robinson's a poisoner too. Having said that, I also think that the consequences of immigration have been visited on the poor rather than the rich in our country. So that there aren't, when you go around the posh bits of Oxfordshire, there are no immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker hostels. There are in Burnley, I'm guessing, and there are in the poor bits of Birmingham and Liverpool and Sheffield. So we're asking the poorest whites to be the least xenophobic, and that's not how the world works. And so I think it's important to listen to the people. And by the way, and then there's got Nigel Farage, who is in a different box, but who, for example, was retweeting why the man, or rather the youth accused of killing these poor kids in Southport, we didn't know who he was. Well, there's a reason for that, is you can't, under the law of the land, you can't identify somebody until they've been brought before a judge if they're under 18. Now, by the way, that's the law, and I believe in the law. And so when Nigel Farage goes, "Oh, I've got no idea," we're not hearing the whole truth. Oh, yes, we are. You know, mate. You know what you're doing. So I feel we have to stand up for the rule of law. We have to stand up for our wonderful open society. And at the same time, we have to listen to people, in particular, or rather in this occasion, disadvantaged whites who are feeling let down and underserved. What are their real grievances? And we need to strip away what they're being told by bad actors from their genuine grievances in terms of access to good quality healthcare and good quality education. So I sympathize with these people where they say, listen, my kids are going to a bad school. We can't get doctor's appointments. I'm with them. The moment they start blaming that on people from refugees, from all the other bits of the world where people come to, you've got, hold on a second, wait. Those are not the same things, and the refugees are not the causes of these problems. So, and I did philosophy, I did drinking at university, but there's a thing in philosophy where you've got to distinguish between cause and correlation. Correlation is something that happens alongside something, but it's not the cause. Cause and correlation. I kind of want to give philosophy. I want to come to Burnley to some of the poorer estates and give a philosophy lecture in a pub, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I could arrange that anytime, John. Anytime you want to come to Burnley, you're welcome. Yeah. I'm gonna let you go in a minute, but my final question is, John. And at the beginning, you said you're a well-behaved altar boy, and now here you are, some way down life's great corridor. Where are you spiritually? You know, I think even the finest people have matters of mental well-being, and I think spirituality plays into that. What is your life and the experiences and the people you've met and the places you've been and the things that you have witnessed done to you today? Where are you?
Well, so I'm presuming no one listens to this podcast, yeah?
Nobody listens to this.
Well, no, I do a bit of God. I do a bit of God. I haven't. I listen. At some point I will go. I haven't done it this trip actually, but I will go to a Ukrainian church and light a candle for my Ukrainian friends who are fighting at the front, and my loved ones back home. I'll light a candle for Ukraine, also for the good people of Russia who at the moment are in prison, also for the some of the daft people who did silly things in Britain during the riots, you know, get a life. But I actually, Jesus is a hero to me, and and the message of love thy neighbor is a beautiful one. But by the way, I mean, I also respect all the other great religions too. We haven't got time for this, but I'm not a big fan of the Church of Scientology.
I wonder why.
You were not there for the beginning of the interview. But I don't think that's a religion. I think it's a cult. But I think now, I'm a bad Catholic. I hardly ever go. There's been times when I've on Christmas Eve, I've sort of slightly drunkenly found the church doing midnight mass, and then to my mild disappointment, realised it's Anglican rather than Catholic, and I thought it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. So but the idea that you can go to a church and say a prayer for your loved ones, and that somebody might be listening, that's a beautiful thing. And the buildings are beautiful. There's a friend of mine, Craig Brown, who wrote a lovely line, which is this: in a packed church full of people, I'm an atheist. In an empty church, I am sometimes touched by the presence of God. And I feel that.
Wow. John, just some of the things that you said there, just for you to hear you say that Jesus is a hero of yours, that fills me with a lot of faith in the work that you're doing. Not that it wasn't there anyway, but it's great to know that where you're working from, it comes from a certain place of of this narrative of just loving one another. It seems almost too simplistic, doesn't it, in this day and age? But it's a great metaphor, great example for life, surely.
Yes. No, I mean, Vladimir Putin lacks that. The people here have got it. There's a lot of love and there's a lot of belief, and it's a Christian. I mean, I haven't looked at the polling numbers, but it's there are a lot of churches. There are a lot of new churches in the war zones. There's a lot of bombed out churches, and that's another reason why Putin is wrong. But I do feel like, being a war reporter, every now and then, when something awful happens, I cross myself and say a prayer, and that helps me. Now, I'm not going to. I mean, listen, this is the Godcast. I mean, I don't go around the world saying this, but on this thing, I'm going to say no. I'm a Christian. I'm not a good one, but I am a Christian, and I believe in Jesus' message. And I like singing the hymns. and I love the beautiful churches, and I love the calm and the serenity of a church, and it helps me deal with some of the evil shit I've seen.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, God bless you for saying that, John. It means a lot to me, and I know it'll mean to a lot of people who watch and listen to this. So, John, I've absolutely loved chatting to you. It's been a real privilege, a real pleasure to hear you speak and your wisdom. And you know, I'm going to hold you to that. You know, I'm going to get you to Burnley for a pint and a philosophy lecture in one of our local establishments.
Oh,
And
I mean, by the way, philosophy lecture.
yeah, right. Okay.
But no, I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it. I've got a really good mate who lives in Todd, Todd Morden,
Yeah,
which
not
isn't.
far.
It's not far,
Round the
is it?
corner.
It's yeah. But this is a wonderful part of the world with wonderful beer.
Yeah.
So I miss it all.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Thanks for what you're doing, John. All power to your elbow, and I'll be praying for you tonight out there in Ukraine. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for speaking up for the people there.
Thank you. And when you tweet, let me know, and I'll tweet it to my my followers and all that stuff. But thank you very much, and yeah, and God bless you. Shh.